Good morning. I think I can speak for everybody when I say it's really nice to be here. I'm going to start out this morning. It might seem a little weird, but just try to track along with me. I remember several months ago, I saw a special, and it was actually, it was on YouTube, but and it was this guy, he was doing like drone footage through one of like those old Texas like ghost towns. Has anyone ever seen anything like that, like old ghost towns or something like that? Or what's that nuclear plant that blew up? Chernobyl, thank you, yes. Things like that. Or people who go into like old mansions and stuff like that where people like left, but they left like furniture. And it's just this kind of eerie feeling whenever you're watching that. Well, I gotta be honest. Over the course of the shutdown, the few times I'd have to come here to get some work done, some studying done, or whatever, I'll be honest, this place kind of felt like that. It really did. You just kind of come in here and the lights are off, right? And no one's been in here for like 2 weeks. And you come in here and you kick the light on, and it still just didn't feel right. It felt empty, like I said, eerie, not creepy. It wasn't a creepy feeling. It was empty. It was eerie feeling. It was lifeless. And several times through our videos on Facebook and everything like that, when we are trying to stay connected in that way, I know David made the point. I tried to make the point that we said it several times. Just because we are separated, we don't stop being the church, right? It doesn't matter where you are. You're still the church, right? It doesn't matter, right? Well, I stand by that, and I stand by that even more now, because whenever I come into this building and you're not here, it's different. It's the people. It's you sitting in the chairs right now. That's what brings this place life. And that just proved that. So whenever you're at home, it's easy to say, it's like, we're the church no matter where we are. But when you try to enter the church building and you can obviously tell that the life is gone, you're like, because this is just drywall and copper wire, And like I say, it just really reinstituted that in me that the building, it's not that the building doesn't matter, it's just not the point. It's not the purpose. It's a tool, and that's it. Because what matters is our relationships that we have with one another and how we're connected through our Lord Jesus. That's what connects us. That's what's important. And then, like I said, the separation just really reinstituted that for me. So I want to say this in another way. I'm going to reiterate how I started, okay? So I said, it's really happy to be here. I want to say, it's really nice to be with you all. In person, right? Because that's really what we mean, right? When we say that, hey, I missed it. Like you might even said it this morning, like, I can't wait to get to church. Anyone say that? Like, I can't wait to be at church this morning, right? I can't wait to be there. It's like, so could you not wait to be at service? Or could you not wait to see people, right? Because, let's be honest, probably what you mean is not, I can't wait to get to services. I can't wait to see my church family, right? And that's what we're actually going to be talking about today, because it's really funny how this kind of paired up. So we're going to be in Acts 20 this morning, okay? We're going to be in Acts 20, starting in verse 7. We're going to skip down just a little bit, okay? And like I said, we're going to start in verse 7. And this is a really interesting story to me. So there's actually a section in the story. We're not going to focus on it too much, but I just want to go ahead and let you guys know that it's part of it. There's this guy who actually falls asleep during the sermon and actually falls out of a window. So I completely understand and expect long-winded preacher jokes later, okay? David's sitting right there, so you can direct them towards him. But anyways, but it's Oh, it's fun times. It's fun times. I just want to say, it's like, it almost seems like the slapstick comedy, right, of this guy who falls asleep, boom, and falls out of a window, But I just want to let you know that we're not necessarily focusing on that, because what really stood out to me in this passage is actually how it starts. Verse 7 actually starts out by saying, they met on the first day of the week. And I thought that was really cool, because this is actually Paul coming back, like in this big circle, and coming back to this church that he started at, okay? Excuse me. And so they haven't seen Paul in a long time and everything, and they meet on the first day of the week. And I thought that was really interesting, because they look forward to this meeting. They look forward to this meeting because they've been separated for a while. And it's just like, oh, wow, that fits very nicely. That's not like me trying to put a puzzle piece in something that doesn't fit. It's like, that fits. That makes sense, right? Because that's where we are. Yes, we might have tried to stay connected while we were separated. And I think we did a decent job at that. Trying to either through video chatting, through Zoom, all that. Yeah, we tried to stay connected as best we can. But there's just something about being able to finally meet in person that's a lot more meaningful. And then that's what we see in the church here in Acts 20, okay? So what I want to do is just go ahead and read, as I throw my notes all over the place. Go ahead and read, starting in verse 7. Let's read about this church. On the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Paul talked with them, intending to depart on the next day, and he prolonged his speech until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where we were gathered, and a young man named Eutychus, sitting at the window, sank into a deep sleep as Paul talked still longer. And being overcome by sleep, he fell down from the third story and was taken up dead. But Paul went down and bent over him, and taking him in his arms, said, "Do not be alarmed, for his life is in him." And when Paul had gone up, he had broken bread and eaten. He conversed with them a long while until daybreak, and so departed. And they took the youth away alive, and they were not a little comforted. The last verse is a little weird. They were not a little comforted. I think the easiest way to just think of that is and they were very comforted. It's like, oh, he's fine. That kind of idea. It's worded a little weird, but that's basically what they're saying. Excuse me. So we see a few things that we want to get out of this passage. And like I said, I know this guy, he fell out of a window and died, right, and everything. And, there's definitely a message there about, the Spirit of God moving and bringing it. But honestly, that's not even what I want to focus on. I really want to focus on the fact that this church met on the first day of the week, because this is the first time we really see, especially here in Acts, the church meeting or starting this tradition of meeting on a Sunday morning service like this. Okay? Now, in this particular instance, it wouldn't have been actually Sunday morning. Their first day of the week would have actually started at night, because in Jewish tradition, a day was night to night, not morning to morning. Okay? So this would have actually been like a Saturday night to a Sunday night kind of idea. Okay? So they started this church service, which would have been our Saturday night, is how they would have started this. Now, something else I want to point out as we read through this passage, you notice they talked about breaking bread twice. It was mentioned twice, okay? And what we can really kind of pull from that is more than likely one of the breaking breads, it doesn't necessarily matter which one, but one of the breaking of breads would have been possibly in the Lord's Supper, okay? Literally the Lord's Supper. They went and they gathered together to honor this tradition, to remember what the Lord had done for them and why they were connected together. Okay, so they would have made that a very big part of the service, right? They purposely would have done that. Okay, so they gathered together, did the Lord's service, the Lord's Supper, and remembered why they were connected. Okay, and then the second one you see, another breaking of bread, okay, was quite possibly a meal. Okay, they actually had a meal together. So we see a few things from this that we can gather, right? That, they met on the first day of the week. They probably did Lord's Supper and, found out why they were connected. And it also proves that every church service should have a catered meal. No, we can't get away with that? Okay. I tried. But, so they had a time of fellowship, okay? They gathered together to enjoy one another's company, okay? Now, this is Paul, okay, that is doing the preacher, the teaching during this time, okay? And this is actually, if we would have read a little bit before verse 7, we'd have found that we were actually in a church in Troas, okay? Now, Troas, the last time Paul was there was in Acts 16, okay? And he sailed from there to get to Philippi, okay? So from Acts 16 to Acts 20 is our separation here, and we're talking about 8 years, okay, is our timeline there. About 8 years, okay? So why is that important? It's important because this church has not seen Paul in 8 years. That's a long time. So now what we're starting to see is this picture of less of like a church service, right, where it's this big production or however you want to think of it. It's less of a church service and more of like a family barbecue, right? So if you got word that a family or a close friend or something like that you haven't seen in 8 years was coming back to town, could only stay one night, and he had to leave the next day, and more than likely, it's the last time you would ever see him, what would you do? You'd throw a party, right? Get out the grill, stay up all night. You wouldn't want to miss a moment of time with that person. And that's what we see. So yes, we can, like I said, make the joke of the long-winded pastor or preacher if you'd like. Yes, but that's not what's going on. This isn't a focus of Paul preached too long and killed a guy. Right? That's not the focus of the passage. No, the focus of the passage is they enjoyed it. They didn't want to miss a moment together. Right? They chose to stay up all night so that way they would not lose any time. And that's what church looked like. Now, obviously our church services look a little different. And there's nothing wrong with our church services. So this isn't me getting ready to say, we do it wrong, and we're going to change everything. Okay, I'm not saying that. But there is I think a heart check here. Okay? Because like I said before, how many people couldn't wait to get to service? Or how many people couldn't wait to see their church family? And I know that may be a blurry gray line for some, but I think it's good to just have like a heart check there. Okay? Because I'll be honest, it was harder for me to be connected and feel like the body, right? And have that encouragement from other people whenever I wasn't around you. And it's easy to be around you when we have a scheduled service every Sunday. So the question is, what do we put our weight on? Do we put our weight on the service or the people? Now, obviously, what we're seeing here is, they didn't have a fancy church building, right? But the only aesthetic thing that they describe is that there's a lot of lamps. There was a lot of light, right? That's it. There's nothing else about, what kind of sound system they have, what comfy chairs they all sat in. None of the rest of that was mentioned. And this is a first-hand account, too, because when we're reading... when we're reading through here, you see words like we. That means Luke, writer of Acts, Luke, he's there, right? So this is a first-hand account. He's seeing this. He's witnessing this. So if he was concerned about saying, well, yes, this was our first church service, our first real church service, and this is how we did it, this is how we organized the chairs, and this is blah, 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 blah. No, that wasn't the focus. The focus was, we haven't seen Paul in 8 years. So we're going to have a party. But a party for the church involves connecting and remembering why we are connected, worshiping God, and reading His Word. And a meal. Enjoying one another. Like, that's the focus. That's what we get out of Acts 20. That's what we get about this first church service. Enjoy one another. And I think the conviction there is, did we? While we were gone, did we lose that connection with one another, or did we just miss dressing up on Sunday mornings? And I say that convictingly from me, from you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm convicted by that. And there's actually several things I've been convicted about, that just let you take time to sit back and think about things, Like, for example, whenever we're not here, like I said, this place felt empty, lifeless. And, whenever I came here, the first thing I kind of thought was like, is this still a church? If we're not here, is this a church? I remember reading an article one time about a church in Florida that's it bought a strip club and turned it into a church. It was like, so it's like, does the building matter? I think the easy answer is to say, is this a church when we're not here? Well, you can make the argument, no. We're the ones that make this a church. If we weren't here, someone else would just buy it and turn it into something else possibly. Right? I mean, if we have to be honest. I hope that never happens, you know what I mean? We've put a lot of work into the property and all that, and we use it well. But sometimes that's just not the focus. So just some questions that I wrote them down here in my notes because these are questions that I specifically was asking myself. What would we think if church service was no longer a polished production of music, microphones, and comfy chairs? What if church had nothing to do with getting dressed up on Sunday morning, but was more like going and visiting a friend's house or meeting at a park? And that was church. What if church made us actually have to depend on one another and not our own pride and can-do attitude? And then the last one was, what if things got bad enough till we never could have met again? Would we still be the church? Would our connection to the gospel, would our ability to remember why we're connected, would that be enough? I don't have an answer. That's just convicting questions of me. I'm like, Lord, I hope. I hope I would have that level of love in me to where I could maintain that connection. Like, what if church maxed out for the next 50 years at 5 people? Because you couldn't meet with any more, because of pandemic things. Like what if? What if something like that were to happen? Could you still remain connected? Like I said, I pray, I hope so. I would like to think I could. But I also would have to admit that there's a chance I couldn't. Because at the end of the day, I'm inadequate. I'm not, you know what I mean? I couldn't do that of myself. I remember a story Francis Chan told about one of the churches he used to pastor. And he was telling a story about how they invited this guy up, and he was blind, had bad kidneys and everything, and they invited him up and just made an announcement, like, hey, John here needs to get to dialysis. It's 5 a.m. every Thursday. Can anyone take him? Some young guy in the back said, yeah, sure, I can do that. No problem. So he started taking him to dialysis. Weeks went by and weeks went by, just taking him. Obviously, they got to know one another. It became blatantly obvious that he was not going to be able to get a new kidney. The hospital said, no, that's just not going to happen. So this young man stood up and basically said, I'm going to give you one of mine. And about this time when Francis is telling the story, he gets really passionate because he starts talking about how other people in the church was talking him out of it, saying, why would you do that? You're a young guy, you've got family, you've got your whole life ahead of you. Why would you do that? And the young guy just responds, because he's my brother. Because he's my brother. And it's really funny because then Francis Chan just says, well, trying to get in the guy's head is like, well, I guess the Bible says if you have 2 coats, give one away, right? So maybe that's what he's using here. I don't know. But he did it. And he gave up one of his kidneys. So this isn't a prescriptive, now this is what love looks like, so, who's ready to give up a kidney? right? I'm not saying that, but Francis was also trying to make the point in this, while I was kind of studying this out, he was just simply trying to make the point of what does it truly look like to love one another like we've been told to? What does that look like? And that actually kind of takes us to our next group of scripture I want us to dive into this morning, and that's in John 15, if you want to go ahead and turn there. And this is a pretty familiar passage. We're going to start on verse 12. And from verse 12, we're going to read down to verse 17. And then after we do this, I want to just highlight some things, and we'll actually go back up. We'll read 7 through 11 after that. But I want to read 12 through 17, John 15, 12 through 17 right now. This is my commandment, Jesus speaking. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. Excuse me. But I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. So a couple of just quick things from this passage, a couple quick nuggets I want us to really catch, okay? The first one here is the first, 4 words. This is my commandment. Commandment. That's a big deal, because I don't know if everyone remembers that there's 10 of those in the Old Testament that everyone likes to quote every now and then. One of them is do not murder. Right? Everyone knows that, right? You're not supposed to murder? Okay. So one is do not murder, right? That's a commandment. So this is also a commandment that we are to love one another. Do we understand the weight here that Jesus is saying? This is my commandment. I'm telling you this is a have to. That you love one another. I think sometimes it's interesting that we kind of sweep that one under the rug a little bit. I'm okay. I don't steal. I don't kill people. But I don't like people either. But it's a commandment. I don't think it's anything we necessarily focus on, really. I think we hear it all the time. I'm a Christian, so, I love people, But I don't know if we necessarily, I don't sometimes, put it with that much weight in our mind, or when we're approaching people that, no, I've been commanded to love this person right here. This isn't a choice. If I'm a follower of Christ, if the Spirit of God is within me, and I want to obey the commandments of Jesus, this is what that looks like. The next big thing I want us to get from this passage is, I don't know if you caught it. I actually didn't catch it until I was studying this out a little bit more. The wording that Jesus uses, where he says, no, you are my friend. And I think it's funny because you always use the term we serve the Lord, right? We serve the Lord. We're a servant of his. And I'm not saying we shouldn't serve the Lord, okay? But I think it's funny that in this particular passage, he specifically points out that I call you friends. He specifically, not servant, friend. I think most of us would be super happy and content if we just knew we weren't his enemy. I think there's probably plenty of people out there who would just be like, I'm okay if God views me neutrally. I just don't want to be against him. I just don't want him mad at me, but I don't necessarily care if he's my friend, this kind of wishy-washy. I think some people would just be totally happy there. But instead, the one who created everything, the one who's the advocate for us in heaven calls us a friend. Let's grab a hold of that for a second, because think about it. This is the person who knows everything about you. Everything about you. All those deep, dark things that you hope no one finds out because you're afraid if they actually find out the true you and actually find out that side of you, they won't love you anymore. All of that stuff, he knows that and still calls you friend. That's what he's saying. Okay, now keep that in mind, and let's back up, and we're going to read 7 through 11 real quick. But I want us to keep in mind that he calls us friend. He knows everything about you, and still chooses to call you a friend, and still chooses to be an advocate for you in heaven, still chose to die on a cross for you. Now let's read 7 through 11. Same chapter, John 15, 7 through 11. If you abide in me, this is still Jesus speaking, if you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. And then that next verse is, this is my commandment. So what's he say here, right? As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love if you keep my commandments. You will abide in me if you keep my commandments. What are my commandments? To love one another. Our relationships, our love and our need and our want to be together, this Acts 20 church that we just got done reading, that type of relationship directly influences and directly deals with our relationship with Lord. As we obey the commandments to love one another, we are who wants to abide with Jesus, right? That means dwell with him, be with him forever, right? Who thinks that sounds nice? We do that by obeying his commandments, and his commandments are that we love one another. So I ask again. And I don't want to necessarily put this really strong on you, but just think about this. Did you miss service, like production type service, or did you miss the people? And that's a heart check for me. I think it's just a heart check in general. But the other thing we have to realize through this is, at the end of the day, that level of love, that like I'm going to give a kidney, right? That level of love that we are called, that we are commanded to have for one another, we are incapable of. We are inadequate to keep up with. And there's only one way to do it. 1 John 4:16, we love because he first loved us. The only way I'm able to show any love, any resemblance of this type of love, the only way I'm able to do that is because Jesus is in me. It's because he loved me first. Is because I put my faith in the completed work that he had on the cross, and I know that he calls me friend, even though all the junk that he knows about me, and he still calls me friend. And it is because of that love, I'm able to outpour that. I'm able to love David and Jerry, and just that's it. That's the only way I'm able to do that. I'm inadequate to do that by myself. I can't. He is my supply for that love, and that's the only way it can outpour to others. So this week, let's think about that. Let's think about that idea of where's the supply, and do I have enough of it? I'll be honest. This last month, I haven't had enough of it. I'll call myself out. Supply's a little low. This has helped. I think this would be something really good for us to do. It's small, and I think we went through it as a church, right, this last year. Read through 1 John. Read through 1 John, and I would challenge you to reread John 15 this week. Read it a couple times. Try to wrap your head around the idea that Jesus calls you a friend, and it is only because of his love in you that you're able to show any resemblance of love to anyone else. Right? We say all the time, commitment and sacrifice, right? Love is commitment and sacrifice. That level of commitment and sacrifice can only come from him. We'll go ahead and close here. And my prayer this week, like I said, and I hope you guys would do the same, and is like I said, read through 1 John. Read through John 15. Read through that, and just really grapple with the idea of your friend, Jesus. Your friend, Jesus, not some obligatory person on a throne, because sometimes that's hard for us, right, to grapple with, right? He's on a throne, he's our king. Think of it as that friend that you want to confide in, right? His Spirit dwelling within you is the only way you love others. Is that supply a little low? How did you view coming back this morning? Sorry again. Thank you. How did you view coming back this morning? I mean, I'll be honest, I probably put a little bit of weight on the fact of, man, it sure be nice to just be at the church, you know? Be at the church. Safe place, right? Because it wouldn't, I don't think we would react the same way if we went over and visited a friend's house and said, okay, yeah, I feel like I just left church. Like, if we had to be honest, I don't know if too many of us would think that, just because tradition and what we're used to is coming to church on Sunday morning, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a good heart check. So just that'd be my prayer this week. If you feel like your supply's a little low, or feel like someone else's supply's a little low, I would encourage you to pray for them right now as we approach this time of response. This is a time for you to speak to your friend.